we are now going to begin. So the first session today we have is understanding the building operations SLA workflow for both on-demand and preventative maintenance. These things will cover such as a run-through of an existing SLA and descriptions of a typical workflow that any client may use and some other relating topics. Leading the first one we have Callum Doyle, one of our technical support engineers who you should all know by now, and a new member of staff here at MASS is Rayner, our Project and Communications Manager.
Thank you for the introduction, Eve. It's Emma here, and I'd like to welcome you to the first webinar session of today, which, as Eve said, focuses on the basis of understanding the building operations SLA workflow for both on-demand and preventative maintenance. I have Callum with me here.
Good morning, everyone.
So let's begin. Before we begin our presentation, here is just a quick screen showing some of the terminology which will come up during the session. I'm sure most of it, if not all, you will recognise from your everyday working practices. Our objective for this presentation is simple: to understand the building operations SLA workflow for both on-demand and preventative maintenance. I must point out that the demonstrations we are walking through today are basic examples and are just a small taster of what will be covered in greater complexity during Edge Build. We understand that you may have questions as we go through the presentation. Please make a note of these as there will be time at the end for questions. So Callum, what is an SLA in Archibus Web Central?
Very basically, an SLA within Archibus Web Central, or Service Level Agreement to use its full terminology, is a customizable governing workflow that allows you to manage as much or as little as you need to of the system's work requests logged within the system. So using the building operations console, you would actually use SLAs in cooperation with the building operations console to manage the work generated.
Thank you for that, Callum. What does the SLA mean in the Archibus Web Central BOMS console?
So I mentioned before that SLAs are obviously attached to the building operations console, and the building operations console is a view that allows you to see all your work within Archibus that is generated either by you as a help desk operator or for any of your clients or questers that exist on site. The SLAs work within the system to manage the workflow so that from generation to each point of management, be it approval step, be it issuing, to the amount of time that you are expected to actually work on it, everything is managed by SLAs in the back end.
I am now going to demonstrate how we will navigate to the Manage SLA screen within Archibus. We begin, of course, by logging into Archibus and seeing the familiar home screen, which has all available modules listed down the left-hand side. We then click into the Building Operations, then On-Demand Work, then Service Desk Manager, then Manage Service Level Agreements. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a visual example of the breadcrumb trail we have followed.
So it's also worth mentioning that obviously if you have your views set up for page navigation rather than process navigation, that you can also navigate to this by clicking the Applications tab at the top of your screen, locating the building operations, specifically either on-demand or planned preventive maintenance section, clicking within that as the previous breadcrumb trail showed, and then you want Service Desk Manager and Manage Service Level Agreements. As we can see on the screen here, we have a very basic example of a SLA within an HQ database. Within this one, we see the workflow, the summary of the SLA itself. The requests state the problem types attached to the SLA, the site and the building code, assuming you have assigned as such to the SLA. The workflow shows the rate at which it works from requested through to approved, to automatically being assigned to a work order, to being issued to the craftsperson, to being completed and closed. Obviously all managed either by a supervisor or a help desk operative attached to that can work within the SLA. Finally, we have the service level, which dictates the amount of time that it is expected to work on this problem type, on this work request that has been created, and who exactly is actually meant to manage it.
Thank you for that example of an on-demand SLA, Callum. Can we do the same thing for preventative maintenance?
Yes, of course. So, again, on our screen, we see here the Preventive Maintenance SLA. So, basic idea is, again, summary, which has got the requests attached to it, the workflow and the service level agreement. There is a difference, however, in this case, especially, and in that there's a lot less attached to both the workflow and the requests. So the requests section is actually just only ever going to have preventive maintenance as the problem type, as that is what you are looking to manage. And then you will attach to each SLA the PM procedures previously defined by you elsewhere within the system. The workflow is a case of it will auto-issue the work request, assign the specific craftsperson attached within the PM procedure, and it will move forward from there. The service level, however, the service level agreement itself, the time expected to match it, is the same in that you've actually got a time to complete and a time to respond to it. More often than not, the preventive maintenance can actually have a level of leeway with regards to the time to respond, simply because you're expecting the procedure to actually happen.
Thank you for those examples, Callum. What are the benefits of using these SLAs?
So benefits of using SLAs within Archivus. The major one is the fact that you allow the system to function as you require it to function. So without SLAs, you would not actually be able to manage the system as you required, and it would all default to being managed by the super user within the system rather than any of your help desk operatives or supervisors that have been created within the system. Obviously, this will create an issue if you don't have the super user attached or the service level agreements created. The management levels will not be ill-defined or undefined if you don't have service level agreements, so it will just simply be created and then immediately approved to a general, to everyone that it can be, and it can only be again managed so that you can only take each step next, be it approval, issuing, completion or closing by the super user. SLAs, within each step you can also assign emails and notification emails to be sent out, and a survey as well can also be sent out at the end of each SLA to show the levels of customer satisfaction for each work request that is being logged and completed by your work team people. This leads on to the next step in that you can actually, from the SLAs, know the reporting benefits, so you can actually gain reports of the SLAs. You can find out how efficient or inefficient your craftspersons are working on specific problem types within specific buildings and sites, so that you know how well you are functioning as a department.
Thank you for that explanation, Callum. Can we take a look at the existing SLA in more detail?
So, I said before that I will actually be using the same on-demand SLA that I showed before, in that we've got the electrical power problem type here. This is specifically attached to the Boston Medical Building. As I said, this is all HQ data, so it's a Boston Medical Building in Massachusetts, America, showing both the site and building here. The problem type recorded would be specifically attached to any power outages that are attached to be it building, floor or room when recorded by the requester. Down the left-hand side, though, it's not actually there, and we will see this in more detail on the next screen. There isn't any priorities. So within each SLA, you can decide whether a problem type should have multiple priority levels or not. In this case, there are none. Within the HQ database, the assumption made is that if power is out, it is not a good thing and it should be resolved for as soon as possible. So stepping through the workflow, you'll find that once it's requested, it's immediately auto-approved onto the next step, and the requester is sent an email when each status change on each step that's created. This auto-approval will go on to the next step within the workflow, immediately issuing the work request to anyone attached to the Boston Medical work team. It will create a work order which it will attach the work request to, and it will notify supervisors again via email for the Boston Medical work team so that they know that they have a work request that's been assigned to them so that they can issue it to their craftspersons, whoever is available, to actually work on it for as soon as possible. Due to the fact that the work order for each work request is auto-created, it will automatically assign it to a work order, and the next step is actually to issue it to a craftsperson. Here we can see that there is a notify craftsperson step. This notify craftsperson step will ping an email to the craftsperson assigned to the work request. And then the craftsperson will work on it, and they will complete, and upon completion and closing there are no more further emails other than, of course, the email to the requester at all status changes, letting them know. Obviously, because this is a fairly major issue within the system as far as the standard archivist system is concerned, the time to respond here is 2 hours. Anything beyond that is a failed SLA, and then the time to complete is 1 week. This is important because you actually have the standard working week stated here as Monday to Friday and no holidays attached to it. So the working week will be Monday to Friday, and it will account for this, including weekends or not. If you actually put it in as working days, you can account for the same, but it's not quite so accurate as saying one standard week. As I was saying, with this type of problem, we have the workflow to our right for that problem type. It will actually have each step, and when we will record the type of problem and the sub-problem, in which case this is electrical, it's a problem type, and sub-problem type power, we will find that the priorities that you can select, highlighted below, will also disappear, which means that we actually have, when creating the work request, it will immediately come through as what you would expect for the service window, to response required within 2 hours by the craftsperson or the supervisor to issue it to the craftsperson, and a completion thereon once it's actually assigned to someone to have it completed within 1 week. Once the work request is created, because it's immediately approved and the work order is immediately created, it will also immediately step it up to assigned to work order. The next steps from here, as we can see, the work request once created immediately going to assigned to work order, will be to either issue or schedule it. In this case, because the expected amount of time is 2 hours, you will most likely issue it rather than schedule it to a craftsperson. Upon issuing, an email will be sent out to the craftsperson that it has been issued to. They will work on it, record their time against the work request, and then either the supervisor or the help desk operator, who is also a part of the work team, will actually complete and close the work request upon confirmation that it has indeed been completed.
Thank you for taking us through those examples there, Callum. For our next step in our example today, we are going to show you how to create a new on-demand SLA. Here we go. The first step here is to navigate to the Manage Service Level Agreement screen using the same breadcrumb trail as before. This is where you will see all previously created SLAs. We then move over to the far right of the screen and press Add New SLA. As we stated at the beginning, from this example I will select On Demand. Here we will create a new SLA from scratch, not using any pre-existing templates. When the new SLA window pops up, we will click on Edit Details. Clicking on the Edit Details button will take us to this screen here. The first step is Request. Here we will create the new SLA using a specific problem type as the trigger. As you can see, the first heading available is Location. You will see that under the Location heading that you can make this request specific to a site, building, floor, or even room. If you leave this section blank completely, this means that the SLA you create will apply to all locations within your estate. For example's sake, and to keep things simple, this is what we are going to do today. We then move on to the issue section, where we will define the problem type for what we are creating the SLA for. Under the problem type subtitle, we are going to click Add More. Here you will see in this Archibus demonstration database, there are 1 and 2 tier problem types. This will allow us to confirm the scope of what this SLA will cover. For example, lighting is a category on its own, so the SLA you create could cover all lighting related problems. However, as you can see, there are also 2 tier problem types, which are more specific. These range from minor problems such as light bulbs or power outlets to actual power issues. For this example, I am going to choose electrical power to allow me to demonstrate how we can use priorities to define SLAs. At this point, it is worth noting that you as users can create, configure and define these problem types to be suitable to your estate and environment. We will expand on the configurable aspects of the BOMS console during the Edge Build event, which is coming up in July. Continuing with the example, again by leaving the equipment code and the equipment standard blank, this means the SLA you create will apply to all. However, as users you can configure the SLA to define up to 30 equipment standards or codes. Again, to keep this simple, I am going to leave this blank. I am now going to tick to use multiple priority levels. I am now going to define the priorities. It is up to you whether you choose 1 or 5 as being the most serious priority. Our advice is that you use whatever is used in your existing business practices for continuity. I'm going to define the priority by the size of the location affected by asking the client to define whether it is a building, floor, or room blackout, or if it is just a single plug socket not working. In this example, I am going to allow the requester to select the priority in the work request by allowing them to indicate what area is being affected. The final heading of the request screen is Person. Here you are able to make SLAs specific to certain requesters by choosing them from a list under Add More. This is not often used in practice. For this example, I am going to leave this blank so the SLA covers all requesters. Here we have just completed the request stage of the SLA screen and have covered the following headings. We are now ready to move through the process to the second stage. We do this by pressing the Proceed to Next Step button available on the right-hand side of the screen. We have now arrived at the second step, Workflow. We are now going to define the workflow for each step of this process by adding in approvals and notifications where required. We are going to do this for each level of priority defined. The first step of the workflow is Requested. I am going to select that approval is required for this SLA, and I am now going to click on Add Approval. That will take us to this window here. I am going to leave the type as Edit and Approve, as this is the access the help desk operator will require. It is at this point that the help desk operator can review the request to check the description supplied matches the priority, as well as identify any abnormalities. Here they can also view where in the estate the work request is from, as Archibus picks up the space data from the user logging the work request. For example, on this Archibus demo database, I am going to select Archibus Administrator under the AFM role as defined in the second screenshot on the right-hand side. You can define this under AFM role using the ellipses to the right-hand side of the AFM role field. There is also a step to add a notification to the help desk operator that there is a new work request requiring approval. We recommend doing this. You can also select whether approval is required by selecting specific building and site codes in the condition field. We are going to avoid using this today to keep things simple. We are also going to notify the requester of all status changes by ticking the box, Notify Requester of all status changes. Once that job has been approved, we are then going to dispatch it to a specific work team to complete the required tasks. We then select the work team that any problem of this type should be fixed by. In this example, I am going to use the central electrical team by selecting them from the Archibus demonstration database work team code. I am also going to auto-create the work order. Here you also have the option to dispatch the job to a supervisor. However, this is not often used in working practice. From our experience, supervisors are more often managing and monitoring assigned work to their team as opposed to completing work themselves. You can choose to notify the supervisor at this step that a job has been assigned to their work team. It would be worth mentioning at this point that a work team is a specific group of individuals who have a certain skill set which they can use to complete certain tasks. The craftspersons are the individuals in the work team with the defined skill sets. Once the job has been assigned, we recommend notifying the approver, in this case the help desk operator. You can do this in the same screen as before by pressing Add Notification and selecting Archibus Administrator as the AFM role. At the point of issue, we are going to notify the individual craftsperson to let them know that a work request has been assigned to them for completion. Finally, once the job has been completed by the craftsperson, we are going to add notifications to the requester and the supervisor. I will say that we recommend keeping notification emails to a minimum to reduce flooding inboxes and reduce stress on your mail server. We recommend the use of the following notifications as a maximum. For the requester, we recommend notifying them once the job has been issued and again once it's complete, the approver once it's been completed, the craftsperson when it's been assigned, and the supervisor when it's been assigned and complete. We have just covered the second workflow step and covered the stages requested, approved, assigned, issued, and completed. I am now going to complete this process for the other three priorities using the same workflow process. You can of course configure these as you feel necessary. Now that I have completed these, I am going to press Next. This takes me to the service level screen, which is where we can define the timeframes we will confine ourselves to when responding to such issues. These can be configured on a priority level and we recommend doing this. For building blackout, I have identified that we will acknowledge receipt of requests within 1 hour and that a craftsperson will be on site within a day to fix and complete. I have also identified that the service desk manager is AFM, which is a super user available in all Archibus databases. Again, I am now selecting the SLAs for all priorities, extending the time frames as the urgency reduces. I have now completed this, and under the summary option I can review the entire SLA to check that I am happy with all that has been defined. I am now going to save this SLA. We can choose to save the service level agreement as a template to use again in the future. This can be used for both on-demand and preventative maintenance SLAs. To locate these again in future, when we go to create a new SLA, instead of pressing Edit Details, we can select the service level agreement from a template we have saved using the option here. So that was our first example. Thank you for listening. To confirm, we have created a new on-demand SLA using the problem types as the trigger and have defined the SLA further by using priorities. We are now going to walk through the same process for preventative maintenance. Here we will use the same navigation steps as before. We will use the Add New SLA button and this time select PM SLA. As before, we will press Edit Details to take us through to the window showing the 3 steps along the top. One of the first things you may notice is that differently to the on-demand SLA screen, the PPM SLA automatically has the problem type defined as preventative maintenance. Again, please note for this example I am using the Archibus demo database. You can configure the contents under the headings to be suitable for your environment. We will go into further detail on this during the Edge Build event coming up in July. For this example, I am going to define the location and equipment for this preventative maintenance SLA will relate to. Using the Add More field under site code, I have selected the Bedford site. I have then selected floor code 01. Under the issue heading, I have selected the equipment standard that this SLA will relate to will be Air Handling Unit, which is shown here as AHU. It is worth mentioning that PPM generation can relate to SFG20 data. Again, here we will go into more detail on this during the Edge Build event in July. The same as the on-demand SLA, we are not going to make the PPM SLA specific to any individual. We are now going to proceed to the second step, workflow, using the button on the right-hand side of the screen. We are going to assign this work request to the Bedford team, who are the craftspersons for this specific site. We are also going to tick the box to notify the craftsperson that a PPM has been generated, which needs to be completed. We are going to notify the supervisor that a job has been issued to one of their craftspersons. Upon completion, as there is no requester, meaning that the job will be closed without notification, if you would like, you can generate a completion request to the supervisor, but be mindful of email traffic. We have the option to save this workflow as a template at the bottom of the screen. As before, here we will define the time frame we will confide ourselves to. As you can see, we have defined the time to respond as 2 days and the time frame to complete 2 weeks. As before, the owner of the SLA is the Service Desk Manager, which for this example case will be the role AFM. You will see that to the right of the screen there is an option to save this PPM as a template. Remember this, as we will take a quick look at this further on in the presentation. Finally, we can review the SLA we have created using the summary below. Remember to press save once you are happy with your new Preventative Maintenance SLA. And there we go, we have created a Preventative Maintenance SLA. We use defined locations and equipment standards, and Preventative Maintenance was automatically selected at the problem type. We also set up notifications to the supervisor. Callum, would you be able to talk us through using duplication to save time?
So within the SLA screen is the opportunity to either create a new SLA from the EdgeNews rooms, which is, of course, Emma has just taken you through, but there is also the option to duplicate an SLA within the Service Desk Manager. In this case, all you would actually do is click the button, which is on the right-hand side, called Duplicate. This will take all the data that has been created for the current SLA, and it will generate a new SLA with the exact matching data. If you actually want to go on and save it, however, you are going to have to change some of it. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a conflict within the database, and it's not going to let you save it. So you will end up with data conflicts, and databases don't like non-unique data sets. So make sure that if you are going to use duplicate, that you must at least change one small facet of it, be it adding an employee record that it's going to be put against, adding a new workflow step, adding a specific room, or just changing the site that it's actually going to apply to. Just make sure you do change something about it. So, today, to summarize what we've actually covered in this first webinar. What is an SLA? An SLA is your governing workflow, which allows you to manage, micro or macro manage your work requests generated within the system, so that you can actually conveniently move on to why using an SLA. You actually create these SLAs so that you can manage the system itself and have it working for you. If you don't have an SLA, then you're going to end up with having a very bad time using the system, unfortunately. How is it used? It's used when generating a work request within the building operations console to manage the work request and make sure that it follows the workflow that you require it to, going and make sure that you actually keep people informed that need to be informed, and make sure that those who need to work on the specific work requests are actually working on the specific work requests. Final point of summary is, of course, how was it created? With a very thorough piece of information from Emma there. It's created through the Service Desk Manager, following the steps for both on-demand and PPM to create the steps for each workflow, for the service level agreement, and of course to assign it to a correct problem type and probably site and building.
Thank you, Callum. So that brings us to the end of our first session today. During this session, we have given you as attendees a taste of the topics that we will be covering during our Edge Build training. This will be taking place on the 5th and 6th of July at Indigo 11 in Wokingham, which is where we are today. The price for this training is £660 per person, but as mentioned earlier by Eve, on completion of the feedback for this webinar, you can receive a discount. At this training, we will be focusing on enabling customers' core users to build their knowledge of their Archibus implementations. If the topics we are covering today are something relevant to you and you may require further training in, and may benefit from doing so in a networking fashion, then please contact edgenews@mass-plc.com or give us a call on 0118 977 8560.
Finally, up next for the next webinar at 1 o'clock today, we will have Shivangi Agarwal and Steve Stedman talking about creating new views within Archivist Web Central and using the view definition wizard and then publishing them for your users. Are there any questions about the subject matter we've covered today?
I've got a question on issuing and scheduling, and it may be more evident once I've done the additional training on the 5th and 6th of July. We currently use defined tradespersons as opposed to a team. Is it quite common just to use a team?
The work teams, it is quite common to use the work teams as a way of managing the work data that goes out, simply because you can then specifically issue it to a group of craftspersons if you've got a large enough organisation. Obviously, if you want to assign it to specific craftspersons, a fantastic example would be if you've got an external contractor who's perfect for work, whose entire focus is working on, say, lifts and lift breakdowns, then you would want to deliberately focus an SLA for that craftsperson. However, if it's just a general situation, even if you've got an SLA just to manage, say, a spill on aisle 3 if you're a random supermarket, you have a work team of people that will actually manage said spill, and thus you would rather have it go out to the work teams rather than the individual craftsperson.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
We do appreciate that that was a rather basic example, and we had varying levels of experience with our attendees today, but I hope no matter how experienced you are with the system that you maybe picked up one small new piece of information.
And obviously we will be going over these matters and this information, as well as in further detail more complex things you can do within your system to make it work better for you at EdgeBuild itself, as these webinars are more a snapshot of what you can do with your system and a lot less detailed than the actual 2-day training session, which will be EdgeBuild itself. We hope you've enjoyed the webinar today and you gained something out of it. So we hope you'll join us at 1 o'clock for the next webinar, and have a good morning.